What the hell is that noise? Sounds like a dying animal.
Gerald Whitmore shoved his chair back on live television. Millions watching. Backstage, a janitor had been humming into her mop handle. Soft, gentle, thinking no one could hear.
Drag her out here. Let America see this.
A stagehand grabbed Tessa Quinn's arm. Bleach-stained uniform, rubber gloves dripping. Gerald pinched his nose.
God! You people carry the smell everywhere. I'll quit if she can sing on my mother's grave!
The audience howled.
I was just cleaning, sir.
That's all you'll ever be good for, sweetheart. Scrubbing toilets.
Tessa said nothing. Her fingers found a worn handkerchief in her pocket, but what came out of her mouth next left Gerald frozen. And 20 million viewers holding their breath. 3 hours before those cameras ever found her face, Tessa Quinn clocked in for the night shift at WKRL-TV in Atlanta. Badge number 0914. Department, Janitorial. She was 32 years old, and this was the only job that would take her after she dropped out of college 6 years ago. Her mother needed her. Dorothy Quinn had been diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease at 51. The oxygen tank beside her bed cost more than Tessa made in a week. The inhaler refills, the specialist visits, the late-night trips to the emergency room when Dorothy's breathing turned into a whistle that wouldn't stop. All of it fell on Tessa. Every bill, every sleepless night, every prayer whispered into a dark apartment at 3 in the morning while her mother gasped for air in the next room. There was no savings account, no safety net, just a mop, a time clock, and a daughter who refused to let her mother die in a waiting room. Tessa had once been something else. At 14, she joined the choir at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church on the south side of Atlanta. The choir master, a retired tenor named Harold Bennett, heard her sing once and pulled her aside after service. "Child," he said, "do you know what you have?" She didn't. He spent the next 8 years showing her. Free lessons every Saturday in the back room of the church. Breath control, pitch, projection. He taught her arias she couldn't pronounce and spirituals she already knew by heart. He pushed her range from a comfortable alto into a soprano that could crack glass. "Your voice is your truth," he told her once, folding a white handkerchief embroidered with a treble clef into her palm. Never let anyone silence it. Harold Bennett died 3 years ago. A stroke, alone in his apartment 2 blocks from the church. Tessa sang at his funeral, the last time she performed for anyone. After that, she packed the handkerchief into her pocket and stopped singing in front of people. She hummed sometimes when she thought no one was listening. In the shower, on the bus, in the empty hallways of WKRL-TV at 2 in the morning, pushing a mop across floors that would be dirty again by noon. The station never saw her. Not really. To them she was a time slot, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and a badge number. The daytime staff called her the Ghost because she came and went without being noticed. Her supervisor, Craig Palmer, liked it that way. Craig was the kind of man who smiled when his bosses walked past and barked when they didn't. He ran the janitorial crew with a clipboard and a short temper. Tessa had watched him write up 3 cleaners in 1 month for violations he invented on the spot. All of them black, all of them women. None of them fought back. Neither did Tessa. She needed the paycheck too badly. But the real power at WKRL-TV sat in a leather chair under studio lights. Gerald Whitmore had been the lead judge on America's Next Voice for 4 seasons. He was famous for 2 things: his ear for talent and his mouth. The internet loved his takedowns. Producers loved his ratings. Contestants feared him. He had once told a 17-year-old girl on live television that her voice sounded like a cat being stepped on, and the clip hit 40 million views in 3 days. What the public didn't know was what happened off camera. 3 former contestants had filed complaints with the network alleging racial bias in Gerald's judging. All 3 were black. All 3 complaints were buried, settled quietly, sealed with non-disclosure agreements, scrubbed from the record as though they never existed. Gerald didn't just dislike certain voices. He disliked certain people. And he had enough power to make that dislike disappear into paperwork. On the night everything changed, Tessa was mopping the stage floor during a break in rehearsals. The studio was supposed to be empty. The cameras were supposed to be off. They weren't. A backup feed had been running for a sound check, and Tessa, alone under the dim work lights, started humming. A hymn first, then a melody. Then, without thinking, she opened her mouth and sang. Just a few bars. Just enough. Enough for the sound engineer in the control booth to freeze, enough for the clip to be saved, and enough for it to land on Gerald Whitmore's phone the next morning, the beginning of the worst mistake he would ever make. The clip was 11 seconds long. 11 seconds of a woman in a janitor's uniform, standing under half-lit stage lights, singing into the silence of an empty studio. No audience, no mic. Just her voice bouncing off the walls like it had been waiting years to be let out. The sound engineer, a 26-year-old named Derek Hale, played it back 3 times before he saved it to his phone. He didn't post it. He didn't share it outside the building. He just showed it to one person, his supervisor in the control room, and said, "You need to hear this." By 9 the next morning, the clip had passed through 14 phones inside WKRL-TV. Producers, camera operators, lighting techs, makeup artists, everyone had seen it. People played it in the break room with the door closed. Some of them watched it more than once. A few of them cried. Nobody told Tessa. The clip reached Gerald Whitmore at 10:47 a.m., forwarded by his assistant with a single line. "You'll want to see this." Gerald watched it in his dressing room, feet up on the vanity counter, coffee in one hand. He didn't cry. He didn't replay it. He laughed. "A janitor," he said out loud to no one. "A janitor singing opera." He called the show's executive producer, Diane Mercer, before lunch. "I want her on tonight's live show." Diane hesitated. "Gerald, she's not a contestant. She's on the cleaning crew." "Exactly." He leaned forward. "That's the segment. We bring her out, let her embarrass herself on national television, and the ratings go through the roof. People love watching someone crash and burn, especially someone who doesn't belong there." Diane was quiet for a moment. "That's cruel, Gerald." "That's television." He hung up. Within the hour, a production assistant was sent to find Tessa's shift schedule. A memo was drafted. Surprise talent segment, live episode 14, with Tessa's name listed under featured guest. No one asked for her permission. No one told her what was coming. Gerald Whitmore had found his entertainment for the night. He just didn't know he had also found the woman who would end his career. Tessa was restocking paper towels in the second-floor bathroom when Craig Palmer found her. "You need to come with me. Now." She didn't ask why. When Craig used that tone, you moved. She followed him down 2 flights of stairs, through the service corridor and into the back hallway behind Studio A. The sound hit her first. Applause, music, Gerald's voice booming through the walls. The live show was already rolling. "Craig, what's going on? My shift doesn't cover—" "The judges want to see you." "See me for what?" He didn't answer. He pushed open the stage door, and the light swallowed her whole. 600 people in the audience. 4 cameras. A live feed running to 20 million homes. And Gerald Whitmore, leaning into his mic with a grin that made her stomach drop. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gerald said, sweeping his arm toward her, "I'd like to introduce someone very special tonight. This is our cleaning lady, the one who thinks she's Beyoncé." The audience erupted. Laughter, whistles. Someone in the front row held up a phone, already recording. Tessa's legs locked. Her chest tightened. Every instinct told her to turn around, walk back through that door, and disappear into the service corridor where no one would ever look for her again. She almost did. Then her hand brushed the pocket of her uniform. The handkerchief was there, folded, soft, the embroidered treble clef pressing against her fingertips like a pulse. Harold Bennett's voice came back to her, steady and sure, the way it always sounded on Saturday afternoons in the back room of the church. "Your voice is your truth. Never let anyone silence it." Gerald was still talking, still laughing, still performing for the cameras. "I'll quit if she can sing," he said again, louder this time, milking every syllable. "America, hold me to it." Tessa looked at the audience. She looked at the cameras. She looked at Gerald Whitmore, the man who had dragged her into this moment to make himself feel powerful. She didn't turn around. She walked to the microphone, and she wrapped both hands around it like it was the only thing in the world that had ever belonged to her. The studio went quiet, the way a room goes quiet before a storm. Not all at once, but in pieces. A few laughs lingered in the back rows. Someone coughed. A camera operator adjusted his lens, expecting a train wreck worth replaying. Tessa stood at the microphone, both hands wrapped around the stand. Her knuckles had gone white. The bleach stain on her left sleeve caught the overhead light, and for a moment it looked like a scar she had been carrying for years. Gerald leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking at the other judges. Nina Calloway, the show's second judge, sat rigid in her seat, lips pressed together, eyes locked on Tessa. She didn't smile. She didn't laugh. She just watched. The third judge, Victor Ellis, a retired pop producer who rarely spoke unless he had something worth saying, tilted his head slightly and waited. The band conductor looked at Tessa and raised his baton. "Whenever you're ready," he said, quietly enough that the audience couldn't hear. Tessa closed her eyes. She thought about the back room of Grace Fellowship Baptist Church, the upright piano with 2 dead keys, Harold Bennett standing beside her, one hand on her shoulder, the other keeping time against his thigh. She thought about the way he used to count her in, not with numbers, but with a nod, slow and steady, like he was giving her permission to exist. She breathed in through her nose, held it. Let the silence stretch until even the air in the room felt heavy. And she began. The first note came out thin, fragile, a thread of sound that barely reached the second row. Someone in the audience snickered. A man in the 5th row elbowed his friend and pointed at the stage. Gerald's smirk widened. He turned to Nina and whispered something behind his hand. Nina didn't respond. Then the second note landed. It was deeper, fuller, a low soprano tone that rolled across the floor of the studio like warm water, touching every corner, filling every gap. The snickering stopped. The whispering stopped. The man who had pointed lowered his hand. The breathing in the front 3 rows seemed to stop altogether. Tessa was singing Nessun Dorma, not the version most people knew, the thundering tenor performance made famous by Pavarotti. This was different. This was a soprano arrangement that Harold Bennett had written for her by hand on staff paper, transposed note by note over the course of 3 months in that back room on Saturday afternoons. He told her once it was the hardest thing he'd ever composed. He told her she was the only voice he'd ever trusted to carry it. By the 3rd phrase, the room had changed. The laughter was gone. The phones that had been held up to record the humiliation were still recording, but the hands holding them had gone slack. A woman in the 4th row pressed her palm to her mouth. A man near the aisle removed his glasses and looked down at his lap. 2 teenagers who had been scrolling through their phones lowered their screens and stared. Tessa's voice climbed. Each note arrived with more force than the last. Not louder, but deeper, richer, as if every year she had spent in silence had compressed into pressure, and now that pressure was being released, 1 phrase at a time. The melody moved through registers that shouldn't have been possible from someone who hadn't performed in 3 years. But the voice didn't know about the 3 years. The voice only knew the Saturday lessons, the hymns, the hours of scales sung into an empty church while the afternoon sun moved across the wooden floor. She didn't open her eyes. She didn't need to. The music was doing what it had always done, telling the truth she couldn't say out loud. The truth about the oxygen tanks and the emergency rooms. The truth about mopping floors at 2 in the morning while the world slept. The truth about a teacher who believed in her when no one else did, and who died before he could see what she became. Gerald Whitmore was no longer smirking. His arms had uncrossed. His hands were flat on the judge's table, palms down, as if the surface was the only thing keeping him upright. His jaw had loosened. His eyes were fixed on Tessa, unblinking, and for the first time in 4 seasons of live television, Gerald Whitmore had absolutely nothing to say. Camera 2 caught it. A slow zoom on his face, the exact moment his arrogance cracked. His lips parted, but no words came out. The director in the control booth whispered into his headset, "Stay on him. Don't cut away." 20 million viewers saw it happen in real time. Victor Ellis, the quiet 3rd judge, closed his eyes and lowered his head. His fingers were laced together on the table. He didn't move. He didn't need to. His stillness said everything. Nina Calloway stood up. She didn't clap. She didn't speak. She simply rose from her chair, hands clasped in front of her chest, and stood there, a judge on her feet before the performance was over. The audience didn't understand it yet, but the people in the industry watching from home did. A judge standing mid-performance was the highest mark of respect the show had ever seen. In 4 seasons, it had never happened, not once. The song was reaching its peak. Tessa's voice hit the high B flat, the note Harold Bennett had circled in red on the staff paper and written beside it in his careful handwriting. "This is where you fly." The note didn't just fill the studio. It pressed against the walls. It climbed into the lighting rig. It found the cameras and rode the signal into 20 million living rooms, 20 million cars, 20 million pairs of headphones on 20 million evening commutes. A stagehand, standing in the wings, sat down on a cable box and put his head in his hands. A makeup artist near the backstage monitor pressed her forehead to the wall and wept. The audience was on its feet before the last note faded. Not a slow stand, a wave. Row by row, from the front to the back, 600 people rising like a tide. Some of them were crying. Some of them were shaking. A teenage girl in the balcony section covered her face with both hands and sobbed into her mother's shoulder. An elderly man in the third row, a veteran wearing a faded service cap, held his hand over his heart and didn't let go. Tessa held the final note for 6 seconds. Then she stopped. She opened her eyes. She looked at the audience, this wall of strangers on their feet, and her lower lip trembled just once before she pressed it still. Her right hand was still in her pocket, wrapped around the handkerchief. The applause didn't stop. It was built. It doubled. It became a roar that rattled the overhead mics and sent the sound meters in the control booth spiking into the red. Gerald Whitmore sat in his chair, motionless. His mic was live. Millions of people were waiting for him to speak. 4 seasons of sharp, cutting commentary, and the man famous for always having something to say could not produce a single word. The silence lasted 9 seconds. 9 seconds of Gerald Whitmore, mouth open, eyes wide, hands flat on the table, being exactly what he had tried to make Tessa look like. Speechless, broken, completely, publicly undone. Nina Calloway reached over and gently pressed Gerald's mic button off. Then she looked at Tessa, and through tears she didn't bother to hide, she said the only thing that mattered. "Where have you been?" The internet didn't wait for permission. Within 90 minutes of the live broadcast, the clip of Tessa Quinn singing Nessun Dorma in a janitor's uniform had been screen recorded, trimmed, captioned, and uploaded to every platform that mattered: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. The video spread like a brush fire across dry land. By midnight, #JanitorVoice was the #1 trending topic in the United States. By 2 in the morning, it was trending in 14 countries. The comments poured in by the thousands.
"I've watched this 40 times, and I'm still crying."
Gerald Whitmore needs to be fired tonight.
"This woman has a voice that belongs in concert halls, not cleaning studios."
He said he'd quit. "We're waiting, Gerald." That last line became its own hashtag. #WeRewaiting Gerald. And it climbed the trending list even faster than the original clip. Memes appeared within the hour. Gerald's frozen face, mouth open, eyes hollow, was already being photoshopped onto everything from courtroom paintings to deer in headlights stock photos. A parody account called @GeraldQuits gained 80,000 followers before sunrise. Gerald Whitmore watched it happen from his penthouse apartment in Buckhead, alone, scrolling through his phone in the dark. He didn't sleep that night. At 6:14 a.m., he called Craig Palmer. "That janitor, Tessa. Find something for her." Craig hesitated. "Find what?" "Anything. She was humming during work hours in a restricted area. That's a violation of her employment contract. Write it up. Make it official." "Gerald, the whole country just saw her sing. If we go after her now..." "I don't care what the country saw. She made me look like a fool on my own show. Find the violation. File the report. I want her badge deactivated by noon." Craig filed the report at 8:30 a.m. Formal write-up. Unauthorized presence in Studio A during active production hours. Unauthorized use of company equipment. The microphone she hadn't asked to use. The one Gerald himself had invited her to stand in front of. The irony wasn't lost on Craig, but he signed the document anyway. He had a mortgage and a daughter in private school. Gerald Whitmore was not a man you said no to. By 10 that morning, Gerald had made a second call, this time to Diane Mercer, the executive producer. "I want the segment cut from the replay." Diane paused.
"Gerald, it's already everywhere."
"Cut it from the official broadcast. Remove it from the network's YouTube. I don't care what's out there on personal accounts. I want it gone from anything with WKRL's name on it." Diane pushed back.
"The clip is the most viewed piece of content this network has produced in 3 years. The board is already talking about—"
"Cut it, Diane, or I walk." She cut it. The official replay of episode 14 aired that evening, with the Tessa Quinn segment replaced by a pre-recorded interview with a country singer from Nashville. The network's YouTube channel scrubbed the clip. The social media team was instructed to ignore all inquiries related to the janitor incident. But Gerald had miscalculated. He had forgotten about Miles Cooper. Miles was 29, a junior camera technician who had worked at WKRL-TV for 3 years without Gerald ever learning his name. He worked the B unit, the backup cameras, the feed nobody watched unless something went wrong. He had seen Gerald berate interns. He had watched Gerald reduce a 19-year-old contestant to tears during a commercial break and then smile when the cameras came back on. He had kept his mouth shut because that was the price of employment. Not this time. Miles had saved the raw, uncompressed footage of Tessa's performance from the B-unit feed. 4 camera angles, full audio, no edits. At 11:42 p.m. on the night of the broadcast, 12 minutes after Gerald's call to Diane, Miles uploaded the complete file to YouTube from a public library computer 2 miles from the station. The title was simple: Janitor Sings Nessun Dorma, Full Uncut Performance. By morning, the video had 2 million views. By the following afternoon, it had 11 million. Gerald Whitmore had wanted to erase Tessa Quinn from the record. Instead, he had turned her into the most talked-about voice in America. The thing he tried to bury had become the thing that would bury him. The story broke on CNN at 7 in the morning. A janitor at a major television studio was mocked on live television by a celebrity judge, then sang an aria that brought the audience to its feet. The judge, Gerald Whitmore, has not yet responded. By noon, it was on every network: ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. The headline variations were different, but the core was the same. A powerful man humiliated a working-class black woman on national television, and she answered with the most stunning vocal performance the show had ever aired. Then the network tried to erase it. The hashtag shifted. Hashtag janitor voice became hashtag justice for Tessa. And the conversation was no longer about talent. It was about power. About who gets to decide whose voice matters. Former contestants of America's Next Voice started coming forward. A 23-year-old gospel singer from Memphis posted a video from her kitchen table, eyes swollen, hands shaking. She described how Gerald had told her during a commercial break that your kind of music doesn't sell to our audience. She had been eliminated the following week. A 20-year-old R&B vocalist from Detroit shared a screenshot of a text from a production assistant warning her to tone down the attitude before her audition, a message that had originated from Gerald's team. A 19-year-old classical pianist from Baltimore, the same girl Gerald had compared to a cat being stepped on live television, posted a single sentence. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every time. 5 complaints, all black contestants, all silenced by non-disclosure agreements that suddenly felt a lot less airtight. WKRL-TV's board of directors held an emergency conference call at 2 in the afternoon. The boardroom on the 14th floor was cold, the blinds drawn, the speakerphone hissing with static from 6 different cities. Gerald Whitmore's contract was worth $14 million a year. The show generated 38% of the network's primetime ad revenue. Firing him would cost the network. Keeping him was starting to cost more. Gerald made his own move at 4 p.m. A 30-second video posted to his Instagram, filmed in his car, sunglasses on, engine running. It was a joke, folks. That's all it was. People are too sensitive these days. I have nothing but respect for everyone who works at this network. The video received 200,000 dislikes in under an hour. Nobody was laughing anymore. Gerald Whitmore did not panic the way ordinary people panic. With tears, with trembling, with silence. Gerald panicked the way powerful men panic. He made phone calls. The first went to his personal attorney, Martin Graves, at 6:15 a.m. She appeared on my show without a signed release, no talent waiver, no image consent form. That footage belongs to the network, and the network answers to me. I want a cease and desist on her desk by the end of day. The second call went to Craig Palmer at 6:40 a.m. Terminate her. Craig's voice cracked on the other end. Gerald, the whole internet is watching us right now. If we fire her... You're not firing her for singing, Craig. You're firing her for violating her employment contract. Unauthorized access to a restricted production area. Unauthorized use of network equipment. Conduct unbecoming of a WKRL-TV employee. Pick whichever one sounds best and put it in writing. Gerald, your name is on the janitorial supervisor line, not mine. You signed her in. You're responsible for her conduct. If this goes sideways, it lands on you first. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Craig understood. He had always understood. That was why he still had a job. The termination letter was printed on WKRL-TV letterhead and placed in a sealed envelope by 9 that morning. Craig Palmer drove it to Tessa's apartment himself. He didn't call ahead. He didn't knock twice. Tessa opened the door in a faded t-shirt and sweatpants. Behind her, the apartment smelled like cinnamon and rubbing alcohol. Dorothy's morning routine. A birthday card sat on the kitchen counter, handmade, the kind a daughter makes when she can't afford to buy one. It was Dorothy's 63rd birthday. Craig held out the envelope. I'm sorry, Tessa. She took it. She read it standing in the doorway while Craig stared at his shoes. When she finished, she folded the letter back into the envelope, set it on the counter next to the birthday card, and said, "Thank you for bringing it yourself." Craig left without another word. He sat in his car in the parking lot for 11 minutes before he turned the key. Dorothy found the letter that afternoon. She read it at the kitchen table, oxygen tube looped behind her ears, reading glasses slipping down her nose. She read it twice. Then she pressed the paper to her chest and cried. The kind of crying that comes without sound, just shoulders shaking and air that won't come. Tessa held her. It's going to be okay, Mama. I'll find something else. But she didn't believe it. And Dorothy knew she didn't believe it. Gerald wasn't finished. At 4 that afternoon, he held a press conference in the lobby of the network building. 3 cameras, 24 reporters. He wore a charcoal suit with a pocket square and the kind of calm expression that only money and lawyers can produce. I want to be very clear, he said, hands folded on the podium. Miss Quinn is a troubled individual. Her behavior on set was erratic and unprofessional. Members of our staff had expressed concerns about her mental stability prior to the incident, and the network acted accordingly. We wish her well, but we have a responsibility to protect our employees and our audience. He took no questions. He smiled once, at the end, for the cameras, and walked back inside. The word unstable trended within the hour. Not because people believed it, but because they were furious. Hashtag She Is Not Unstable began climbing alongside hashtag Justice for Tessa. A clinical psychologist in New York posted a 12-minute video dismantling Gerald's language, calling it textbook character assassination designed to discredit a victim before she can speak. But Tessa didn't see any of it. She was sitting in the back pew of Grace Fellowship Baptist Church, alone, in the dark. The same pew where Harold Bennett used to sit during her Saturday lessons, eyes closed, nodding along to every note. The church was empty. The piano lid was down. The choir robes hung in the closet behind the altar, untouched since the last Sunday service. Tessa pulled the handkerchief from her pocket, unfolded it on her lap, and traced the embroidered treble clef with her fingertip. She didn't sing. She didn't hum. She just sat there in the silence and let the weight of everything press her into the wood. The knock came at 7 in the evening. Tessa almost didn't answer. She had been sitting on the couch in the dark for 2 hours, phone off, curtains drawn. Dorothy was asleep in the next room, breathing shallow against the hiss of the oxygen tank. The birthday cake on the counter, store-bought, vanilla, the only one Tessa could afford, sat untouched, candles still in the box. She opened the door to a face she barely recognized. Miles Cooper stood on her doorstep in a wrinkled flannel shirt, a laptop bag over one shoulder, and an expression caught somewhere between guilt and resolve. "You don't know me," he said. "I'm the one who uploaded the video." Tessa stared at him for a long time. Then she stepped aside and let him in. They sat at the kitchen table. Miles opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. On it were 4 video files, raw, uncompressed footage from the B-unit cameras, time-stamped and unedited. Every angle of her performance, every frame of Gerald's face, every second of the audience standing. But that wasn't what Miles had come to show her. He clicked on a 5th file. It was shorter, 43 seconds, and it showed something that hadn't aired. In the footage, taken from a camera mounted above the judge's table, Gerald Whitmore could be seen reaching under the desk during the second verse of Tessa's performance. His hand found a small audio panel, the backup mic control board that the judges used during commercial breaks. He toggled the switch. The switch was labeled Mic 7, Stage Center. He had tried to cut her microphone. The system had defaulted to the overhead boom, which was why the audience still heard her. But Gerald had tried. On live television, in front of 20 million people, he had physically attempted to silence her mid-performance. "I pulled this from the raw feed before they wiped the drives," Miles said. "They deleted the B-unit footage at 6 this morning. If I hadn't saved it last night, it would be gone." Tessa looked at the screen. Then she looked at Miles. "Why are you doing this?" Miles closed the laptop. He was quiet for a moment. 2 years ago, Gerald called me a diversity hire in front of the entire crew during a lighting setup. He said the only reason I had a badge was because the network needed to hit a quota. Miles paused. "I didn't say anything then. I'm saying something now." The second ally came by phone. Nina Calloway called Tessa's personal number at 9 that night, a number she had gotten from a production assistant who owed her a favor. "I'm not calling as a judge," Nina said. "I'm calling as a witness. I saw what Gerald did under that desk. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I know now. And I'll say it on camera, under oath, wherever you need me. The third ally found Tessa through the internet. Vivian Brooks was a civil rights attorney based in Washington, D.C. She had spent 22 years litigating workplace discrimination cases, 3 of which had reached the Supreme Court. She saw the clip of Tessa's performance on a Tuesday morning. She saw Gerald's press conference that afternoon. By Wednesday, she had booked a flight to Atlanta. She met Tessa at the church.
I'm not here to sell you anything,
Vivian said, sitting in the pew beside her.
I'm here because what happened to you is illegal, and the man who did it is still on television pretending it wasn't.
Tessa didn't respond right away. She folded the handkerchief in her lap, pressed the treble clef flat with her thumb, and said, I don't have money for a lawyer. You don't need any. This one's on me. The fourth ally was the one no one expected. Raymond Cole, 3-time Grammy-winning producer, founder of Cole Records, the man who had launched the careers of 6 platinum artists, was watching the clip from his studio in Nashville when something stopped him cold. Not the voice, the technique, the breath control, the way Tessa transitioned between registers without a seam. He had heard that method before. He had heard it from one person, his oldest friend, a retired tenor who taught lessons in a church on the south side of Atlanta, Harold Bennett. Raymond picked up the phone and called his assistant. Find this woman. Get me on a plane to Atlanta tonight. The network called it A Night of Truth. A special episode, unscheduled, unscripted, broadcast to 34 million viewers on a Friday night. The largest audience the show had ever drawn. The set had been stripped. No band, no contestant stage. Just 4 chairs, a long table, and a screen mounted behind the judges' panel. Gerald Whitmore sat in his usual chair, legs crossed, expression measured. He had spent the afternoon rehearsing talking points with his attorney. He believed the network would protect him. He believed his $14 million contract made him untouchable. Tessa Quinn walked in from the side entrance. Simple black dress, flat shoes, the handkerchief folded into her breast pocket, the treble clef just visible. Beside her walked Vivian Brooks, carrying a leather briefcase and the calm of a woman who had done this before. The host, Patricia Dunn, opened with a single question. Mr. Whitmore, do you stand by your comments regarding Miss Quinn? Gerald leaned into his mic. I've already addressed this. It was a light-hearted moment taken out of context. I have nothing but respect for... Then you won't mind if we show the audience what happened after your light-hearted moment, Vivian said. She nodded to the control booth. The screen lit up. Camera angle from above the judges' table. Gerald Whitmore, mid-performance, reaching under the desk, his fingers toggling the switch labeled Mic 7, stage center. The exact moment he attempted to cut Tessa's microphone while she was singing on live television. The studio audience gasped, sharp, collective, like the air had been punched out of 600 lungs at once. Gerald's face went white. That's taken out of context. I was adjusting the levels. This is the audio engineer's log from that evening, Vivian said, placing a document on the table. No peaking on any channel. MIC7 was manually toggled to off at the 214 mark. The override came from your panel, Mr. Whitmore. Nina Calloway turned to the camera. I was sitting 3 feet from him. I saw his hand go under the desk. I'm saying it now, on the record, because I should have said it that night. The screen changed. Text messages between Gerald and Craig Palmer appeared. Terminate her. Find something. Unauthorized access. Conduct unbecoming. Pick whichever one sounds best. Your name is on the line, not mine. Gerald's attorney stood. My client will not be responding to... Your client already responded, Vivian said. On Instagram. He called a woman who was dragged onto a stage without consent, humiliated in front of millions, fired without cause, and publicly defamed. He called her the problem. The audience erupted. A woman in the third row pointed at Gerald. You said you'd quit! Quit! Others joined. The chant filled the studio. Hashtag, we re-waiting, Gerald! Patricia Dunn raised her hand. It took 30 seconds for the room to settle. Then a man stood from the second row. Tall, silver-haired, navy blazer. Patricia handed him the microphone without being asked, because everyone in the industry knew his face. Raymond Cole. I've been in this business for 41 years, he said. I've produced records for artists whose names you hear on the radio every day. I'm standing here because I heard something in that video I haven't heard in a very long time. He looked at Tessa. That technique, the breath control, the register transitions, the phrasing, I've only heard one teacher produce that sound. His name was Harold Bennett. He was my oldest friend. He died 3 years ago, and I thought his method died with him. Raymond's voice caught. He paused, swallowed. It didn't. It's standing right there, in a woman you called a cleaning lady. The network president, Alan Mercer, walked to the stage from the wings. He carried a single sheet of paper. He placed it on the judge's table in front of Gerald and said, loud enough for every microphone to catch, Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. Gerald looked at the paper. He looked at the cameras, all 4 of them, all live, all recording the exact moment his career ended on the same stage where he had tried to end someone else's. He stood up, he buttoned his jacket, and he walked off without a word, past the cameras, past the crew, past the audience that had once laughed with him and now watched him leave in silence. The applause started after he was gone. It started with Nina Calloway, who clapped once, slowly, looking directly at Tessa. Then the audience. Then the crew. A standing ovation that wasn't for him. Gerald Whitmore's career didn't end with a scandal. It ended with silence. No network called. No producer reached out. No agent returned his messages. Within 72 hours of A Night of Truth, every major entertainment company in the country had quietly removed Gerald Whitmore from their contact lists. His talent agency, Sterling Artists, dropped him in a 1-paragraph email that didn't even use his first name. His Instagram, which had once boasted 4 million followers, hemorrhaged 200,000 in a single week. He posted nothing. He said nothing. The man who had always had something to say disappeared into the noise, and the noise didn't notice. Craig Palmer was demoted the following Monday. Stripped of his supervisory title, reassigned to overnight equipment maintenance. The same shift, the same hallways, the same floors that Tessa had cleaned for 3 years. The network required him to issue a public written apology, which was posted on WKRL-TV's website beneath a banner that read, Our Commitment to Accountability. Craig wrote it himself. It was 4 paragraphs long. The last sentence read, I should have said no. I didn't. I'm sorry. Tessa read it once and never mentioned it again. The GoFundMe campaign closed at $412,000. Tessa used the first portion to pay off Dorothy's medical bills, 18 months of oxygen tank rentals, 2 emergency room visits, and a specialist consultation that had been scheduled and canceled 3 times because Tessa couldn't afford the copay. She used the second portion to move Dorothy into a ground-floor apartment with wider doorways, better ventilation, and a window that faced a small garden where the morning light came through clean. Dorothy sat by that window on the day they moved in, breathing easier than she had in years, and said, "You did this with your voice, baby." Tessa shook her head. "I did this with a mop and a prayer. The voice just showed up when I stopped being afraid of it." Raymond Cole signed Tessa to Cole Records 3 weeks after the broadcast. The contract was modest by industry standards. No arena tours, no brand endorsements, no pressure to become something she wasn't. Raymond had seen what the machine did to talent, and he had no intention of feeding Tessa into it. "We're going to make one album," he told her in his Nashville studio, surrounded by gold records and framed photographs of artists who had stood in the same room decades before. "We're going to make it right, and we're going to dedicate it to Harold." Tessa recorded the album over the course of 4 months. 8 tracks, 3 arias, 2 spirituals, 2 original compositions written by Raymond, inspired by Harold Bennett's teaching notes. Notes that Tessa had kept in a shoebox under her bed for 3 years. The final track was a solo piano arrangement of Amazing Grace, the hymn she had been humming in that empty studio the night everything began. The album was called The Back Room. WKRL-TV offered Tessa the vacant judge's seat on America's Next Voice in a private meeting attended by the network president, 2 board members, and Vivian Brooks. Tessa accepted on one condition. "I want the network to establish a music scholarship fund," she said, "for young people who can't afford lessons. Name it after Harold Bennett." The Harold Bennett Music Foundation launched 6 weeks later with an initial endowment of $1 million from the network and matching donations from Raymond Cole and 3 other industry figures. The first class of 12 scholarship recipients, ages 14 to 21 from 7 states, began their training that fall. On the day of the foundation's launch ceremony, held in the WKRL-TV studio where it had all begun, Tessa stood at the same microphone, the same stage, the same lights. But the chair where Gerald Whitmore had sat was empty now, and in its place, mounted on a small wooden stand behind the judge's table, was a glass frame. Inside the frame was a white handkerchief, embroidered with a treble clef, pressed flat against black velvet. Beneath it, a brass plate read, "Your voice is your truth. Never let anyone silence it. Harold Bennett." Tessa looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at the 12 young scholars sitting in the front row, nervous, wide-eyed, clutching their acceptance letters. She smiled, and she sang. On a Saturday afternoon in October, 6 months after the broadcast that changed everything, Tessa Quinn walked through the doors of Grace Fellowship Baptist Church. The pews were no longer empty. 12 young voices filled the room. Uneven, uncertain, some too loud and some too soft, but all of them trying. The Harold Bennett Music Foundation's first scholarship class had begun their weekly sessions here, in the same back room where Tessa had once stood as a 14-year-old girl who didn't know what she had. She set her bag down by the upright piano, the same piano with 2 dead keys, and listened. A girl in the front row, no older than 15, was attempting a scale that kept slipping flat on the 3rd interval. The boy beside her was humming something he hadn't been asked to hum, eyes closed, lost in a melody only he could hear. Tessa didn't correct them. Not yet. She let them stumble. She let them reach. She let them sound exactly like what they were. Beginners, standing at the start of something they didn't fully understand. Then she sat at the piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and played a single chord. The room went still. "Let's start again," she said, "from the top. And this time, don't be afraid of the note. Just let it out." 12 voices rose together, rough, imperfect, alive. Tessa closed her eyes and listened, and for a moment, just a moment, she heard Harold Bennett's voice underneath theirs, steady and sure, counting them in the way he always did. Not with numbers, with a nod. Outside the church, the afternoon sun moved across the wooden floor, the same way it had moved across that floor every Saturday for 20 years. Nothing had changed in this room except the person sitting at the piano. And everything had changed because of her. If it were you, standing on that stage, bleach on your sleeves, the whole country laughing, would you have stayed? Or would you have walked away? Go back and watch the opening one more time. Watch Tessa's hand when Gerald first speaks to her. Watch what she reaches for. Most people miss it the first time. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Honestly, this one hit different for me. Like, imagine having that kind of voice your whole life, and nobody ever hearing it because you're too busy surviving. That's the part that stays with me, not the revenge, not Gerald getting wrecked. Just Tessa finally being heard. That's it. That's the whole point. Honestly, this one hit different for me. Like, imagine having that kind of voice your whole life, and nobody ever hearing it because you're too busy surviving. That's the part that stays with me. Not the revenge, not Gerald getting wrecked. Just Tessa finally being heard. That's it. That's the whole point.